We live in a world where science and spirituality are often placed on opposite ends of a spectrum. One concerned with equations and experiments, the other with meaning and inner experience. Yet, if we look closely, the boundaries are not as rigid as we've been taught. Quantum physics, in its most mysterious discoveries, is quietly pointing toward truths that philosophers, mystics, and visionaries have spoken of for centuries. That everything is connected, that thought and reality are not entirely separate, and that the universe is far stranger and far more responsive than our common sense suggests. At the heart of this lies quantum entanglement, a phenomenon so baffling that even Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. Particles once connected seem to remain linked across space and time, reacting instantly to one another, no matter the distance. What if this is not just an oddity of physics, but a reflection of a deeper principle? That our consciousness, our intentions, and even our capacity to manifest outcomes are part of the same web of hidden entanglement. This is not about abandoning reason or indulging in fantasy. It is about recognizing that manifestation is not simply a matter of wishful thinking, but a dialogue with a universe that is already interwoven with our inner states. The hidden link between entanglement and manifestation offers us both a scientific mystery and a profound invitation to see ourselves not as isolated individuals, but as active participants in shaping reality. When we first hear the terms quantum entanglement and manifestation, they seem to belong to entirely different domains. One is buried in the equations of physics, a subject handled in laboratories by scientists armed with particle accelerators and chalkboards filled with symbols. The other lives in the language of personal growth, spirituality, and psychology, spoken of in meditation halls, self-help books, and late-night conversations about dreams and destiny. At first glance, the two worlds don't appear to intersect. Yet, when we look closer, we discover a strikingly similar challenge at the heart of both. The challenge to our most basic assumptions about cause and effect, about what is possible, and about the role we ourselves play in shaping reality. Quantum entanglement, for instance, forces us to abandon the idea that the universe operates only in neat, linear lines. Classical physics taught us to believe that effects follow causes like dominoes falling in sequence. You push here, something moves there. Straightforward, measurable, predictable. But entanglement doesn't play by those rules. It reveals a universe where two particles, once linked, remain mysteriously connected regardless of distance. Change the state of one, and the other instantly reflects that change. Even if separated by galaxies, no signal travels between them, at least not in any way we understand. And yet the connection persists. Now, let's hold that next to the idea of manifestation. Manifestation also challenges the straightforward logic of cause and effect. It suggests that what we focus on internally, our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotional resonance, somehow plays a role in shaping what happens externally. To the strictly rational mind, this can feel absurd. How could something invisible, intangible, and purely subjective influence the concrete flow of events? But manifestation, like entanglement, insists that our linear assumptions are too narrow. That there is a deeper order of connection at play, one that does not conform to the limits of physical separation or ordinary logic. Of course, the skeptic might protest, but entanglement is proven in experiments, while manifestation is anecdotal at best. And yet, think about what's really happening here. Both ideas disrupt the boundaries we rely on. Entanglement tells us particles are not truly separate. Manifestation suggests that we ourselves are not truly separate from the unfolding of reality. Both invite us to move beyond the comforting illusion of isolation, that we are sealed off, that events happen independently of us, that the universe is a machine grinding away without our participation. The hidden connection, then, is not about importing science into spirituality or forcing spirituality onto science. It is about recognizing a shared underlying principle, the collapse of separation. Physics is showing us, in its own precise language, that the universe is more deeply interconnected than we can easily grasp, and manifestation is reminding us, in lived human terms, that our inner world of thought and feeling may not be a private chamber, after all, but a transmitter, a resonant field, a participant in the same web of interconnection. This realization carries both intellectual and personal weight. Intellectually, it destabilizes the old worldview that kept us confined to strict boundaries of matter and mind. Personally, it demands responsibility. If we accept that what happens out there may be entangled with what happens in here, then we cannot dismiss our thoughts as idle, nor our beliefs as irrelevant. We are, in some sense, co-creators in the unfolding tapestry of reality. The hidden connection between quantum entanglement and manifestation is not a casual metaphor. It is a call to recognize that the strange and the mystical are not strangers to one another. They may, in fact, be two different languages attempting to describe the same truth, that we are inextricably bound to the world, and the world is inextricably bound to us. And once we see that, the question is no longer whether the connection exists, but how consciously we choose to live inside it. To understand the hidden link we're exploring, we need to pause and look more closely at what quantum entanglement actually is, not as a dry scientific definition, but as a living concept that shakes the very foundations of how we think reality works. Entanglement is often described as one of the strangest features of quantum mechanics. Imagine two particles that were once in contact, bound together in some way. Even after they drift apart, whether they are a centimeter away or light years apart, they remain mysteriously connected. When you measure the state of one, the other instantly reflects a complementary state, as though they were still side by side. No communication is sent between them, no signal passes through space, and yet the correlation is perfect and immediate. For most of us, that description alone is enough to feel unsettling. How can two separate entities behave as if they are still one? It violates the very picture of the universe that our common sense builds upon. We like to believe that distance matters, that separation is real, and that things only influence one another through visible interaction. Entanglement refuses all of that. It says, in effect, that once two things are linked at a deep enough level, no amount of distance can break that link. The fabric of space itself does not seem to sever the relationship. Now, think about the implications. If particles can remain united in this invisible bond, what does it say about the deeper nature of reality? At the very least, it suggests that our traditional way of dividing the world into isolated parts is incomplete. We are not living in a universe of separate billiard balls colliding, but in a universe where the parts are threads woven into a single, vast tapestry. Pull one thread, and the entire pattern shifts. When we bring this into human terms, the analogy becomes even more striking. Haven't you experienced moments where you suddenly thought of someone, and within seconds they called you? Or situations where an idea you carried quietly inside seemed to appear in the world around you, echoed in conversations, books, or even strangers' words. While science may hesitate to label such phenomena as entanglement, the resonance is undeniable. These moments remind us that perhaps we too are part of a web of connection, not bound by space, time, or linear logic. Entanglement also forces us to consider the possibility that what we observe is not the whole story. There may be dimensions of reality that operate beyond the senses, beyond even the instruments of physics. For centuries, spiritual traditions have insisted that the visible world is only a fragment of the whole, that beneath appearances lies a unity, a field of interconnection. Quantum entanglement doesn't prove those traditions correct, but it certainly leans in their direction. It gives a scientific face to an ancient intuition that separateness is an illusion. And here is where manifestation begins to overlap with entanglement. If reality is indeed interconnected at its deepest levels, then the idea that intention and thought could ripple outward is not as far-fetched as it first seems. If particles themselves resist being confined by distance, then perhaps consciousness, which is not yet fully understood by science, also participates in these invisible linkages. Manifestation becomes less about bending the rules of the universe and more about working within its most fundamental truth, that everything is already bound together, responding in ways we cannot always measure, but can often feel. The point is not to romanticize entanglement or misuse it as a metaphor. It is to recognize that the boundary between science and experience may not be as sharp as we once believed. Physics shows us a reality where connection is primary, where the universe itself behaves as though it remembers its own unity. Our task is to recognize that unity in our own lives, to see that what we think, what we feel, and what we do are never isolated acts. They reverberate outward, entwined with a reality far larger than what we can see. Entanglement tells us, in no uncertain terms, that the universe is woven from invisible threads of relationship. And once we accept that, the choice becomes clear. Do we live as if we are isolated fragments, or do we live as if we are participants in an indivisible whole? If there is one message quantum entanglement delivers with stunning clarity, it is that separation is not as real as we think. Our ordinary perception tells us that we are distinct individuals, moving through a world of objects and events that stand apart from one another. I am here, you are there, and the space in between is empty. This view is reinforced by our senses, by language, and even by classical science, which for centuries taught us to see the universe as a collection of separate parts interacting mechanically. But entanglement interrupts this picture. It suggests that separation is, at best, a convenient illusion, and at worst, a profound misunderstanding of reality itself. Consider what entanglement implies. Two particles, split apart, remain so deeply connected that distance cannot erase their unity. If this is true for particles, the building blocks of matter, why should it not be true at other scales? Why should it not ripple upward into the realm of human experience, consciousness, and the world of meaning? When we view reality through this lens, the walls we so confidently construct between self and other, between inner and outer, begin to collapse. What happens within us is not sealed off from what happens around us. The currents of thought, emotion, and intention may participate in the same interwoven field that particles demonstrate so vividly. This challenges us to rethink the story we tell ourselves about life. For centuries, the dominant narrative in the West has been one of individualism, the self as a separate unit, competing, striving, and surviving in a world of scarcity. While this story has driven innovation, it has also bred isolation anxiety, and disconnection. Entanglement offers a different narrative. It whispers that we are not alone, not disconnected, not sealed in a private bubble. Instead, we are threads in a larger pattern, nodes in an infinite network, participants in a dance, where every movement reverberates through the whole. From a psychological perspective, the illusion of separation is one of the deepest roots of human suffering. When we believe we are fundamentally alone, we become defensive, fearful, and reactive. We cling to control, we compete for resources, we feel perpetually at risk. But when we glimpse, even for a moment, that separateness is not absolute, a shift occurs. We begin to see that our well-being is intertwined with the well-being of others, that our inner state colors the outer world, and that the boundaries we defend so fiercely are more porous than we imagined. Manifestation is built upon this collapse of separation. If our thoughts and feelings are not confined within our skulls, but are instead entangled with the wider field of reality, then what we cultivate internally does not stay internal. It radiates outward, shaping the possibilities that emerge, attracting or repelling opportunities, aligning us with one set of outcomes rather than another. Manifestation is not about forcing the world to obey our desires. It is about recognizing that the world and the self are already entwined, already in conversation, already part of a single process of becoming. Of course, this perspective demands a kind of humility. To see the collapse of separation is not to imagine that we, as individuals, control everything. It is to understand that we are participants, not puppeteers. Just as an entangled particle cannot choose its outcome in isolation, we too are bound into a greater pattern. Our power lies not in domination, but in alignment. When we align our inner life, our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions, with clarity and coherence, we participate more harmoniously in the field of connection. The collapse of separation does not rob us of agency. It deepens it by showing us that our agency is relational rather than isolated. So, the collapse of separation is not a loss. It is a liberation. It frees us from the prison of isolation and opens us to a reality where what we do within ourselves matters deeply to the world around us. Once we see this, the question is no longer whether separation is real, but how we choose to live in a universe where connection is the ground of existence. And in that realization lies both responsibility and possibility. For if separation is an illusion, then every thought, every choice, every act is already part of the larger whole. The real question is whether we will act with unconscious detachment or with conscious participation. If entanglement shows us that separation is an illusion, then the next question becomes, what is it that links us to this greater field of reality? How do we, as conscious beings, participate in this hidden web of connection? The answer, I believe, lies in consciousness itself. Consciousness is not simply a byproduct of the brain, a flicker of awareness inside an isolated skull. It may very well be the bridge, the interface, through which the inner world and the outer world meet, influence, and mirror one another. Think about how we usually define consciousness. In everyday terms, we see it as awareness, the ability to think, to perceive, to experience. But consciousness also has another property, one that often goes unnoticed. It directs attention. Whatever you focus on begins to take shape in your awareness. And the remarkable thing is, what you repeatedly hold in your awareness has a way of spilling over into your lived experience. Psychologists recognize this in the form of self-fulfilling prophecies, cognitive biases, and the powerful effects of expectation. What you consistently attend to becomes the filter through which you encounter reality. In that sense, consciousness is not passive, it is generative. Now, if we extend this beyond psychology into the deeper possibilities suggested by quantum entanglement, the picture grows even more profound. Consciousness may not only filter what we perceive, but may actively participate in shaping what manifests. The inner and the outer may not be two separate domains, but two sides of one process. Your thoughts are not sealed in your mind, disconnected from the world. They may be entangled with the very fabric of reality. This is why so many spiritual and philosophical traditions emphasize the cultivation of inner clarity. When your consciousness is scattered, distracted, and fragmented, the signal you send into the field of connection is equally chaotic. But when your consciousness is steady, coherent, and intentional, something shifts. You become more than a receiver of the world's events. You become a transmitter. Consciousness functions as the bridge that allows what begins as thought and feeling to ripple outward and participate in shaping the larger flow of events. Of course, this idea can be uncomfortable. It challenges us to take responsibility for our mental and emotional states. It asks us to move beyond the comfortable belief that our inner world is a private space with no consequences. If consciousness is a bridge, then what you dwell on, what you feed your awareness with, matters. It matters not just for your subjective experience, but for the reality you are co-creating. And yet, this responsibility is also a gift. It means we are not powerless passengers in a blind universe. We are not condemned to live at the mercy of random chance. Instead, we are participants in a dialogue between mind and matter, between inner intention and outer manifestation. Consciousness is the medium through which that dialogue unfolds. The bridge is always there, whether we use it deliberately or unconsciously. The real question is whether we will cross it with awareness, or whether we will drift across it blindly, allowing unconscious fears and unexamined beliefs to shape the world we inhabit. When you understand consciousness as a bridge, manifestation is no longer about magical thinking or forcing outcomes. It becomes about cultivating the kind of inner state that resonates with the realities you wish to live. It becomes about coherence, alignment, and clarity. In that sense, the practice of manifestation is the practice of consciousness itself, the deliberate use of attention, awareness, and intention to participate meaningfully in the interconnected whole. And so we return to the larger theme: separation is an illusion, connection is the foundation, and consciousness is the bridge that allows us to move between the two. The question is simple yet profound. If your consciousness is the bridge between thought and reality, what kind of reality are you choosing to build with every act of attention? If consciousness is the bridge between our inner world and the greater fabric of reality, then one of the most intriguing pieces of evidence supporting this idea is what physicists call the observer effect. It is one of the most puzzling, almost unsettling, discoveries in modern science that the very act of observation changes the outcome of an experiment. When we attempt to measure a particle at the quantum level, it behaves one way if unobserved and another way if observed. In the famous double-slit experiment, light or electrons act like waves when no one is watching, spreading out in patterns of probability. But the moment they are observed or measured, they collapse into particles, into definite outcomes. In other words, observation itself seems to participate in shaping what reality becomes. Now, this is where science meets philosophy head-on. For centuries, we believed the universe to be objective, indifferent to whether anyone was looking or not. But the observer effect suggests something radically different, that consciousness is woven into the process. That reality does not fully crystallize until attention is placed upon it. This does not mean we invent reality out of nothing, but it does mean that what is possible remains in flux until it interacts with awareness. Possibility collapses into actuality through observation. When we connect this to the practice of manifestation, the parallel becomes striking. Manifestation, at its core, is the deliberate use of intention and focus to bring potential into form. The observer effect gives us a scientific metaphor for this process. Where you place your attention matters. What you consistently focus on begins to collapse into your lived reality. Your mind, in this sense, acts like the measuring device in the quantum experiment. It influences which potential outcomes take form and which remain unmanifested. From a psychological standpoint, this is already well supported. Studies on attention and cognition show that what we repeatedly focus on becomes more visible in our environment. It's the classic example of buying a new car and suddenly seeing that same model everywhere. The car was always there, but your attention tuned your perception, collapsing what was once overlooked into something you could no longer miss. This selective focus is not only a mental trick, it also guides your behavior, which in turn shapes your circumstances. Intention directs perception, and perception directs action. But the deeper layer here is not just about noticing. It's about realizing that intention carries weight beyond the subjective. If the universe operates in probabilities, then our focused attention may be one of the forces that help determine which probability comes alive. Intention is not idle wishing. It is the alignment of thought, emotion, and will, a directed energy that interacts with the field of possibility. Of course, this is not a license for magical thinking. Intention is not a guarantee that life will bend to our every whim, but it does shift the landscape. It changes the probabilities, the opportunities, the resonances that enter our experience. It's not about controlling the universe, but about collaborating with it, participating in the unfolding of possibility by guiding our attention with clarity. This is why scattered, unfocused intention rarely produces results. Just as a vague observation in physics yields uncertainty, vague focus in life leads to drift. But when your intention is precise, when your attention is steady, when your consciousness is clear, something powerful happens. The field of probability begins to organize itself around your focus. The observer effect teaches us a profound truth, that we are not mere spectators of reality. We are participants, and our attention is one of the most powerful tools we possess. Every moment of focus is a choice that shapes what takes form and what remains potential. So the question becomes, are you observing unconsciously, letting fear, doubt, and distraction collapse your possibilities into outcomes you never wanted? Or are you observing consciously, directing your intention toward the realities you truly wish to see? If the observer effect shows us the power of attention, then vibrational resonance reveals the mechanism through which attention begins to translate into lived experience. Resonance is a principle we can all understand intuitively, even if we don't often stop to think about it. Strike a tuning fork in a quiet room, and another tuning fork across the space will begin to vibrate in sympathy without anyone touching it. Place two pendulums on the same wall, and over time, their swings will synchronize, moving in harmony. Resonance is nature's way of creating coherence, of aligning frequencies so that they amplify one another rather than cancel each other out. Now imagine this principle applied not just to sound waves or physical vibrations, but to the very field of consciousness and experience itself. The emotions you carry, the beliefs you hold, the thoughts you repeat, these form a kind of vibration. They are patterns of energy, rhythms of being. And just like tuning forks, the world around you responds. Situations, people, and opportunities that match your inner state are drawn toward you, while those that do not resonate tend to fall away. This is not simply mystical speculation. Psychology gives us plenty of examples of resonance in human behavior. If you enter a room filled with anxiety, you will feel it almost instantly, even if no one says a word. If you approach someone with genuine warmth and confidence, they are far more likely to respond in kind. Emotional states spread through resonance, creating synchronization in groups and relationships. Entire cultures, in fact, can resonate at collective frequencies of fear, hope, or despair. But the principle goes deeper than mere mood contagion. It speaks to the very process of manifestation. If reality itself is interconnected, if separation is an illusion, then your inner vibration does not stay inside of you. It interacts with the larger field, seeking out coherence, attracting experiences that mirror your state of being. This is why attempts at manifestation that come from a place of inner conflict or doubt often fail. The words may say one thing: I want success, I want love, I want abundance. But the underlying vibration says something else: fear, scarcity, unworthiness. And it is that vibration, not the superficial wish, that resonates outward and shapes what returns. To live in alignment with resonance means cultivating coherence between what you desire and what you embody. It means not merely stating intentions but becoming them. If you want peace, you must resonate with peace internally. If you want love, you must cultivate love within yourself. If you want opportunity, you must live in a vibration of openness and possibility. Resonance does not respond to pretense, it responds to authenticity. The universe, it seems, listens less to what we say and more to what we are. When you understand this, manifestation stops being about forcing reality to give you what you want. It becomes about synchronization, about tuning your own being to the frequency of the reality you seek. Just as two pendulums find harmony when left to swing together, your life begins to align when your inner state and your outer intention move in coherence. This is why practices like meditation, gratitude, and visualization are so powerful. They are not superstitions, they are tools for tuning. They help quiet the noise, bring the scattered vibrations into focus, and align your inner resonance with the outcomes you wish to draw into your life. And once resonance is established, synchronization follows naturally. Life begins to mirror back the state you carry within. The principle of resonance invites us to stop asking why the world doesn't give us what we want, and instead to ask, what am I resonating with? What frequencies am I broadcasting through my thoughts, emotions, and choices? Because whether we realize it or not, resonance is always at work. The only question is whether it is working unconsciously against us or consciously for us. So let this truth settle deeply. You are not only living in the world, you are vibrating with it, shaping it, synchronizing with it. The life you attract is the life that matches your resonance, which means the power to shift your reality begins with the courage to shift your vibration. If resonance explains how inner states synchronize with outer experiences, then belief and expectation explain why some vibrations take root while others dissolve. Belief is the filter through which resonance is either amplified or muted. You may hold a desire. You may even focus your attention on it with great intensity. But if your underlying belief contradicts that desire, The two cancel each other out. It is like trying to play a melody on an instrument that is hopelessly out of tune. The sound may exist, but it will never carry the clarity needed to harmonize with the world around you. Psychology has long understood the power of belief. Placebos work not because of the sugar pill, but because the mind expects healing. Athletes often perform better when they visualize success, not because visualization magically changes their muscles, but because belief primes the body to act in alignment with that expectation. When we believe something is possible, we unconsciously organize our actions, perceptions, and even opportunities around that possibility. And the opposite is just as true. When we believe something is impossible, no amount of effort seems to break through, because the unconscious mind is already working against us. Manifestation, then, is not just about intention or vibration. It is about alignment between what we consciously desire and what we unconsciously expect. Many people attempt to manifest outcomes they secretly do not believe they deserve or think are out of reach. They might affirm abundance while carrying a deep belief in scarcity. They might visualize love while quietly expecting rejection. And in this hidden contradiction lies the reason why their efforts fall flat. Belief sets the boundaries of what can crystallize from possibility into actuality. This is where the connection with quantum principles becomes especially compelling. The universe at the quantum level is probabilistic, not fixed. Reality emerges out of probabilities that collapse into specific outcomes. Belief functions much like the parameters that define which probabilities are even accessible to us. If you believe strongly that something is possible, you open the door for that probability to collapse into reality. If you believe it is impossible, you slam the door before it even has a chance. On a deeper philosophical level, this forces us to confront a crucial truth. We are not passive recipients of reality, but interpreters who shape reality through our expectations. Every human being lives inside a self-constructed world, not merely because of external circumstances, but because of the beliefs that frame those circumstances. Two people can encounter the same challenge, and one will see it as an opportunity, while the other sees it as a dead end. The difference lies not in the world itself, but in the beliefs they carry. This is why working with belief is one of the most powerful steps in manifestation. It is not enough to wish for a new reality. You must believe it is available to you. Belief creates psychological coherence, which then strengthens resonance, which then draws experiences into synchronization. Without belief, the chain is broken. With belief, the chain is complete. So the task becomes one of inner transformation, of examining the inherited, unconscious assumptions we carry about life, about ourselves, and about what is possible. Many of these beliefs are not truly ours. They were absorbed from culture, from family, from experiences of limitation. But if manifestation is about conscious participation in reality, then we must question whether these old beliefs are serving us or merely trapping us in probabilities we no longer wish to live. When you shift a belief, you shift a world. The probabilities open, the resonance strengthens, the synchronization accelerates. What once seemed impossible begins to feel natural, even inevitable. Belief is not just a mental attitude. It is the architect of possibility. So I leave you with this challenge. What beliefs are you carrying right now that silently dictate the boundaries of your reality? And more importantly, what would your life look like if you chose to believe in possibilities that extend beyond the limits you have inherited? Up to this point, we've been looking at entanglement and manifestation primarily through the lens of the individual. Your thoughts, your resonance, your beliefs, your intentions. But to truly grasp the depth of this phenomenon, we need to widen the frame. Entanglement does not stop at the personal level. Just as particles remain connected across distance, so too are human beings entangled within collective fields of thought, emotion, and culture. The hidden link between entanglement and manifestation becomes even more powerful when we recognize that what we create is not only individual realities, but shared ones. We've all felt this in subtle ways. Think about walking into a room where tension lingers in the air. You don't need anyone to tell you what's happening. You sense it immediately. Or recall a moment when you found yourself swept up in collective joy, like a crowd singing together at a concert, or people uniting around a common cause. These moments remind us that we are not isolated minds sealed in private containers. Our consciousness resonates with others, synchronizes with others, and together creates something larger than the sum of its parts. This is where the psychology of the collective mind intersects with the physics of entanglement. If individual intention can influence probability, then collective intention can alter entire trajectories. History itself is evidence of this. Revolutions, social movements, cultural renaissances. None of these emerge from isolated individuals alone. They are born from shared beliefs, synchronized intentions, and collective resonance that reaches a tipping point. When enough people begin to imagine a new reality, the old one collapses, and the new one manifests. And this has profound implications for the world we live in now. Many of the challenges we face, climate change, social division, economic instability, are sustained not only by external conditions, but by the collective beliefs and fears that entangle us. If millions of people hold beliefs of scarcity, competition, and mistrust, the collective reality that emerges will reflect exactly that. But if enough people shift into resonance with cooperation, abundance, and possibility, the probabilities themselves begin to change. The field reorganizes. You might ask, but can human consciousness really influence something as vast as society, or even the planet itself? Consider this. Every cultural shift begins as an idea in the mind of one or two individuals. Those ideas spread, gather momentum, and eventually crystallize into movements that reshape nations. If that's not manifestation at the collective level, what is it? Entanglement simply offers us a deeper metaphor, and perhaps even a mechanism, for understanding how these shifts occur. And here lies the responsibility. If we are entangled beyond the individual, then our personal state of consciousness is never just personal. The fear you carry contributes to a field of fear. The hope you nurture contributes to a field of hope. Each belief, each intention, each act of awareness resonates outward, feeding into the larger fabric that we all share. This is why personal transformation is not selfish. It is service. When you elevate your consciousness, you participate in elevating the collective consciousness as well. Imagine, for a moment, if large numbers of people truly understood this. Imagine the power of collective manifestation, not just for personal gain, but for the healing of communities, for the renewal of societies, for the transformation of global challenges. The same principles of resonance, intention, and belief that shape individual lives could, if harnessed collectively, shape the destiny of humanity. This is not an abstract dream. It is already happening in small ways, in movements for justice, in communities of mindfulness, in networks of innovators who believe in possibility rather than limitation. Every great leap forward has come when collective consciousness aligned with a new vision of reality. Because entanglement beyond the individual is not just a scientific mystery. It is a call to recognize that each of us is contributing, in every moment, to the reality we all must share. And if that's true, then the responsibility is clear to consciously shape not only our own lives, but the world we leave behind. Up to this point, we've spoken about resonance, belief, and collective entanglement, as if they are structures we can understand intellectually. And they are. But manifestation is not only an intellectual process, it is also deeply intuitive. Intuition is that quiet knowing, that inner compass, which often whispers before reason has a chance to speak. And in many ways, it may be the most direct expression of how we interact with the quantum field. Think about the nature of intuition. It does not present itself as a logical argument. It comes as a sense, a pull, an immediate recognition. Science might describe it as the unconscious mind, processing vast amounts of information and delivering conclusions without conscious awareness. But when you experience it, intuition feels like something more than mere calculation. It feels like tapping into a larger field of awareness, as though the mind is momentarily entangled with possibilities not yet visible to the eye. In the context of manifestation, intuition functions like a bridge. While belief sets the boundaries of possibility and resonance aligns us with outcomes, intuition guides us toward the paths that can make those outcomes real. It shows us where to focus, when to act, and when to wait. And often, those intuitive nudges arrive in ways that defy logic, leading us to opportunities that the rational mind could never have predicted. We've all had moments when intuition proved itself undeniable. You think of someone out of the blue, and they call within hours. You get a feeling about a choice, whether to accept a job, pursue a relationship, or take a leap of faith, and later realize that choice changed the entire trajectory of your life. These moments remind us that the mind is not confined to linear reasoning. There is a part of us tuned into the deeper web of entanglement, able to sense connections before they appear on the surface. This is where intuition becomes central to manifestation. You might set an intention and resonate with it, but if you ignore the intuitive signals that arise, you cut yourself off from the very guidance that could lead you to fulfillment. Intuition is not passive. It is a dialogue with the field of possibility. The more you listen, the more precise the dialogue becomes, and the more synchronized your actions are with the outcomes you seek. Philosophically, intuition challenges our obsession with control. The rational mind wants certainty, wants to see the entire map before taking a step. But manifestation does not work this way, because reality itself is not fixed. It emerges moment by moment, choice by choice. Intuition asks us to trust the unfolding, to surrender to a process that cannot be fully calculated in advance. It is a practice of faith. But not blind faith. Faith rooted in the recognition that we are entangled with something larger than ourselves. And this trust in intuition is not about abandoning reason. It is about integration. Rational thought helps us plan, analyze, and prepare. Intuition helps us align, sense, and act in flow with the deeper field. When the two work together, manifestation becomes less of a struggle and more of a dance. You no longer force reality into your design, you move with it, guided by an intelligence that seems to flow through you rather than merely from you. The challenge, of course, is that intuition often whispers while fear shouts. Most people dismiss their intuitive nudges because they don't fit neatly into logic, or because they are drowned out by the noise of doubt. But the more you cultivate stillness, through meditation, reflection, or simply paying attention, the clearer intuition becomes. It is not that intuition is rare, it is that we rarely listen. So when we speak of quantum manifestation, we are not just speaking of energy, belief, and resonance in abstract terms. We are also speaking of an inner faculty available to every one of us. The ability to sense and respond to the unseen patterns shaping our lives. Intuition is the way the field communicates with us. It is the voice of entanglement, speaking through the human heart. And perhaps this is the ultimate invitation to begin trusting that voice. To honor the nudges, the subtle knowing, the quiet pull toward something greater. Because if resonance sets the tone and belief opens the door, it is intuition that guides you across the threshold. All the principles we've explored, resonance, belief, entanglement, intuition, are not meant to remain abstract ideas. They are meant to be lived. The real transformation happens when we move from merely understanding these concepts to embodying them, when we stop treating manifestation as a technique to use occasionally and begin living as conscious co-creators of reality. To live as a conscious co-creator means recognizing that every thought, every emotion, every choice, and every action is part of the dialogue we are having with the universe. The world is not simply happening to us, it is responding to us. The vibrations we carry set the tone for what emerges, not in a simplistic, wish and it appears, fashion, but in the deeper sense that reality reflects the coherence, or incoherence, of our inner state. This is why self-awareness becomes the cornerstone of conscious creation. When you notice the beliefs that shape your expectations, when you observe the emotions that color your resonance, when you listen to the intuition that nudges you toward alignment, you begin to live with intention rather than default. Life stops being a series of accidents and becomes a series of choices. Choices informed by an awareness of your entanglement with the field of possibilities. And this doesn't mean controlling everything. Quite the opposite. Conscious co-creation is not about micromanaging reality or forcing outcomes. It is about entering into partnership with the larger intelligence of existence. It is about knowing when to set an intention, when to release attachment, when to act boldly, and when to allow space for the unexpected. Living this way transforms manifestation from a desperate attempt to bend reality into compliance, into an elegant dance with a universe that is already alive with possibility. The psychological implications of this are profound. When people live unconsciously, they often feel powerless, as though life is something that happens outside of their influence. But when you begin to live as a conscious co-creator, you reclaim agency without clinging to control. You realize that your choices matter, not because you can dictate every outcome, but because you are always contributing to the field, always shaping probabilities, always influencing the direction of your experience. This is empowerment, but it is also responsibility. Philosophically, this shift changes how we view meaning itself. If we are entangled participants in the unfolding of reality, then life is not random. It is participatory. Every moment carries the possibility of significance, because every moment is an invitation to align, to contribute, to co-create. The ordinary becomes extraordinary when we recognize that even our smallest acts ripple outward into the shared field of existence. And this awareness extends beyond the personal. Living as a conscious co-creator means realizing that your growth contributes to the collective. Every time you choose belief over doubt, hope over fear, or trust over cynicism, you feed those qualities into the shared web of humanity. Your personal alignment strengthens the collective alignment, just as every disharmonious thought weakens it. In this sense, conscious creation is not just about personal manifestation. It is about planetary transformation. Of course, none of this promises perfection. To live as a co-creator is not to escape challenge or uncertainty. It is to meet those challenges from a different state of being, to see them not as barriers, but as catalysts, shaping us into greater alignment with the reality we wish to experience. It is to live with the awareness that even difficulty can be a form of dialogue, calling us to refine our beliefs, deepen our resonance, and strengthen our trust in the field that holds us all. So the question becomes, will we drift unconsciously, carried by inherited beliefs and passive expectations, or will we step into the role of active participants, aligning thought, emotion, and intuition with the realities we wish to create? Because ultimately, living as a conscious co-creator is less about what we manifest and more about who we become in the process. The outer results are important, yes, but the deeper transformation is the awakening of a new identity, one that recognizes its entanglement with everything, its power to influence, and its responsibility to contribute. And perhaps that is the true essence of manifestation, not merely bringing things into existence, but awakening to the fact that we are always creating, individually, collectively, moment by moment. The only choice left is whether we will create unconsciously or consciously. So I leave you with this: reality is not a closed book written in advance. It is a living manuscript, unfolding with every thought, every belief, every act of intention. The pen is in your hand. The question is, what story will you choose to write? We began with a mystery: quantum entanglement, that spooky action at a distance, which defies our ordinary logic. We explored how it reflects something deeper, something that resonates not only within the fabric of physics, but also within the fabric of our lives. Manifestation, when seen through this lens, is no longer just about hoping or wishing. It is about aligning, resonating, believing, and stepping into the role of conscious co-creator. What science reveals at the smallest scales, and what philosophy has whispered for centuries, is that we are not isolated fragments. We are part of a living web where thought, emotion, and intention ripple outward into the shared field of reality. Every belief you hold, every vibration you carry, every intuitive act you follow contributes to the probabilities that eventually crystallize as your life, and collectively, as our world. This is both an invitation and a responsibility. An invitation to live with greater awareness, to trust your resonance, to honor your intuition, and to believe in possibilities larger than your inherited limitations. And it is a responsibility to recognize that your personal alignment feeds into the collective, that the reality we share tomorrow depends on the consciousness we cultivate today. So let us not walk through life as passive observers. Let us step forward as conscious participants in the unfolding of reality, aware that each moment carries the potential to shape the story of our lives and the destiny of our world. Because the truth is this: reality is not something happening to you. It is something happening through you, with you, and because of you.